Rachel Holt for Nestor.com. Thanks for checking out our fantasy football podcast for Week 13. I'm joined by Adam Rank of NFL Media. You can find him on the show Fantasy and Friends. Adam, our time is winding down, and that's kind of sad, but thanks for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yes, it is bittersweet. Once you said Week 13, I started doing the math, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have a reason to bother you in about 3 or 4 weeks, and it hurts my heart a little bit.
We're hurt as well, but we'll try to enjoy the time we have with you now and get some good advice from you. It's crunch time here. We're nearing the playoffs, and if you're listening to this podcast, it means you're probably either in the playoffs or you are fighting for a spot or you're just extremely bored and you needed something to listen to. But let's talk playoff strategy in general. If you're already in the playoffs, Adam, what is your approach to Week 13 as opposed to someone who is just fighting for a playoff spot?
Yeah, if you're sitting in a pretty good position, and I do have a couple of teams that are like that, and you just look at your roster and you can kind of identify the players you're going to be playing week in and week out. And you're like, okay, so I've got this roster. I'm not going to be benching Le'Veon Bell or Spencer Ware, probably, barring injuries. Devontae Booker's a good backup. I've got my receivers set. So you start looking at handcuffs. For instance, if you have Ezekiel Elliott, go pick up Alfred Morris. Make sure that you have him. Go kind of fortify yourself that way. If you have some roster spots, you can take a chance on somebody like Alshon Jeffrey, who's probably on the waiver wire right now, who you can just stash on the bench. Adrian Peterson is starting to work out again, or he's running. And most mortal human beings probably wouldn't be back until Week 16, but it's Adrian Peterson. Would it surprise you if next week you're like, yeah, he's playing, because they're going to have 10 days off, and so they're going to have all that extra practice time or all that extra downtime. It's going to be, I'm telling you, the stories are going to start on Monday, Peterson's looking good. He wants to play in Week 14. I guarantee you that'll be a headline on Monday. So if you want to go pick up guys like that and kind of store them, then I think that's a pretty good idea. And then see if anybody this week has to panic. If somebody who's fighting for a playoff spot, for instance, let's say they have to do something unthinkable, like they have to drop Mariota or Rashard Matthews or somebody like that, just sniff around and see if somebody does that, and just try to look for high upside type things, and you can kind of get rid of the dudes you've been hanging on to for too. Hey, Duke Johnson's still in my roster. I could probably get rid of him. So I would make those moves.
You mentioned Mariota. In Week 13, there are 2 teams on byes, the Cleveland Browns and the Tennessee Titans. If you've been starting a Browns quarterback, I would assume you're not in the playoffs in your league, or you just have terrible, questionable decision-making skills. But if you did have Marcus Mariota, you may be looking for a quarterback this week. So, Adam, I read your column on NFL.com because I was looking for a quarterback.
Oh, thank you.
You threw a couple names out there for guys who may not have been picked up right away to have a solid week, but they're guys who are intriguing for this week, and the names include Alex Smith, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Colin Kaepernick. So if we're looking for a guy to pick up that may still be available, who is your top pick out of those guys?
Well, I put Kaepernick out there. I don't anticipate that he's going to be available on your waiver wire, but of course, through the optics of due diligence, you want to make sure, go and check, and you never know. But he's the guy. I know a lot of people, they continue to have questions about Kaepernick, and it's amazing to me because you know who's scored the most fantasy points at the quarterback position over the last month?
Drew Brees?
No, it's Aaron Rodgers. But that's close. I get it. All right, fine. It's a big name. Colin Kaepernick is number 2. He's had more fantasy points than some of the big names like Drew Brees, Cam Newton, Case Keenum, all the big stars. More points than him. One of the reasons why, of course, is that he's running the football. He gives you a nice base each and every week. And since he took over as the starter in Week 6, he has more rushing yards than LaShawn McCoy, Todd Gurley, even Carlos Hyde, his own teammate. So he's a better runner than Carlos. Listen, if Colin Kaepernick could just figure out a way to throw himself the ball, I think the 49ers prayers would be answered. And then I know a lot of people get into it and they're like, well, I kind of don't like him. I don't like that I'm like, look, whether you believe in what Colin Kaepernick is saying off the field shouldn't matter to you. I mean, look at it this way. Most NFL quarterbacks love Kenny Chesney. I don't know why, but they do. And if I was sitting there and would limit myself to only the quarterbacks who don't like Kenny Chesney, I think my options would probably be like Ryan Fitzpatrick and Matt Barkley. I don't know if they like him or not. I'm just assuming. Like Barkley's a California guy. Fitzpatrick went to Harvard. So it makes sense, right? Like they probably don't like. But that's it. Those are the only guys. And so you don't worry about that. Just go for the guy who's going to score you the most points. So it should be Kaepernick.
I think with that beard, I'm just held up on this because I think Fitzpatrick definitely looks like a country music kind of guy, but that's just me.
All right. Well, maybe you're right. Okay, I'll rethink that. I'll try to think of somebody else. Because even like somebody was like, "What about Dak Prescott?" I'm like, "Ah, he's from the South." Like, that's true. And so like Cam probably like whatever. So yeah, I think it's Barkley. Maybe Goff. So it's probably Barkley and Goff. But I didn't want to mention two Rams quarterbacks in that rant. So, but anyway, but he's probably gone. And then there's Alex Smith, who's never appealing. But here's the deal with Alex Smith. And I finally I was talking to former NFL cornerback Eric Davis the other day about him, and we were discussing Alex Smith because he's a truly befuddling quarterback. And you can count on, I swear to you, every time there's a great matchup, like if he's playing, let's say he was playing the Bears or somebody like that, somebody who's got like the worst pass defense, you're like, oh, Alex Smith this week's got the Bears 31st ranked pass defense. Yeah, he'll throw for 181 yards on a touchdown. And that's it. They're like, what is wrong with you? But when he's actually matched up against another great quarterback, that's when he plays his best. Like if he's going up against Tom Brady, he throws 4 touchdowns. And it makes no sense why. It's not based on the matchup. So this week he's got Matt Ryan, and it's so funny to me because like Matt Ryan and Alex Smith have basically played the same number of games. There's a 1 game difference. I think Matt Ryan's played 1 more. Matt Ryan has thrown for 10,000 more yards in his career, and it's crazy. But this just seems like one of those games where you're like, yeah, he'll probably try to match Matt Ryan. He'll throw 3 touchdowns. He'll do something goofy, even though the matchup's sort of good too. So I think that's probably a nice play if he's available, although he's kind of a big name. The riskiest one, though, is Fitzpatrick. Like that's a risk. That takes some gumption. Like you look at it, because I have this decision. I have Dak Prescott, and I was thinking about it, and because I have the Dak Mariota stream, and I knew this was going to come. I knew it was haunting me in Week 12, and I tried to make amends. I tried to pick up Kaepernick a couple of weeks ago, but at one point I was like, dude, I just can't keep 3 quarterbacks because I needed an extra running back because with Dante Moncrief. You know what I'm saying? So you're like, so I regrettably had to let Kaepernick go because I'm like, I'm not playing him. I can't have 3 guys. And obviously, at this point he's picked up. So you're like, so I'm going to go with Dak. And even though the Vikings have not allowed a top 12 quarterback performance this year, it's like, okay, still though, just give me the base. Just give me 15, 16, hopefully 18 points in standard NFL.com leagues. Like, just do that. Just do the bare minimum. I've got a great team. But the decision is like, could you go pick up Ryan Fitzpatrick? And I'm looking at it. The matchup says yes, and all the science says yes. And I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, nope. So I don't know. I can't do it. So, but yeah. So those 2 guys, 3 if you include Kaepernick, would be my top options. Did I have somebody else? Let me look, because I know Brock Osweiler. Oh, yeah, because Simeon's got a foot injury. Goff's playing the Patriots, and I'm sure everybody in New England's heard this by now, but rookie quarterback starting at New England in the Bill Belichick era, 0-7 with 4 touchdowns, 14 or 15 interceptions. Their passer rating's 51.7. It's brutal. Ooh. So, yeah, I was excited about Goff last week when he was throwing the ball around the yard against the Saints. You're like, okay, cool. This could open it up for Todd Gurley. But then you're like, the Patriots just destroy rookie quarterbacks in Foxborough. Wait, is it still Foxborough? Yeah. So he's not an option. Carson Wentz doesn't really intrigue me. I'm like, Tannehill. I'm like, I might just take the 0. I think Tyrod Taylor's been dropped. Tyrod Taylor's been dropped in a number of leagues.
Yeah.
So he's another guy you can go investigate, but it's not a great week. I got to be honest with you.
No, you don't sound too excited about the prospect of picking up Fitzpatrick, and we totally get it here in New England. We are Nesson. We do care about the Patriots, so let's talk about them for a second. As you mentioned, they take on the Rams this week at Gillette Stadium. Rob Gronkowski is causing some problems for fantasy owners as we head into this crucial final stretch. He's been dealing with injuries all season. It's nothing new, and you should have expected this when you drafted him. But most recently, he left the game against the Jets with a back injury without putting up any points. Now we're not sure if he'll play Sunday, and we'll likely not know as usual until the last second possible. So what's the play if you own Gronk and rely on him as your tight end? Do you pick up someone else, drop Gronk maybe?
Well, I would never drop him. I mean, you look at this game, and I don't want to speak ill of the Rams, but dude, you guys are going to beat them. Like, come on. Like, let's be serious. Like, do you think Jeff Fisher is going to waltz in to Foxborough and suddenly find the magic and beat the Patriots? Like, let's be serious. The one thing, though, is that defense is so good. I don't think they've allowed a 100-yard rusher this season, so I'm benching Gurley, unfortunately. If you've got Gronkowski, I would say the best available option for you is Vance McDonald. He's the most targeted receiver in San Francisco. And a lot of people just don't like Kaepernick, so they don't think of any of the San Francisco options. But just use that to your benefit. Go grab him, have him on the bench. If Gronk plays, I would certainly start him. I know that it's a risky play, but any tight end is a risk. So I wouldn't. You know, you've gone through this so far this season, so you hopefully already have somebody on your roster you can rely on. If Vance McDonald's gone, Zach Ertz has got a pretty good matchup this week, and Zach Ertz is good. Will Tye has been playing well. He's sneaking in and out. Vernon, although the Washington. Man, I feel so bad for Jordan Reed going up against the Cardinals. Even if he's healthy and can play, the Cardinals just shut down everybody. So I would go, Dwayne Allen. That's what I was trying to think of. Dwayne Allen might actually sneak in there too if you're really desperate. But I hope you've already got this situated. But Vance McDonald is my pick.
Okay, some good options out there. Another Patriots question for you. What do we make of this Malcolm Mitchell guy? In the last 2 games, he has 3 touchdowns. Against the Jets, he was targeted 7 times. We know that it's frustrating to have Patriots receivers and running backs on our fantasy team because we don't always know who is going to be the go-to guy of the week, of course. However, there's a number of Patriots players that are a little banged up right now, including Gronk, Martellus Bennett, Julian Edelman. So do you feel comfortable starting Malcolm Mitchell in Week 13?
Absolutely. I mean, think of it this way. Malcolm Mitchell he's benefited from going over Hogan, right? So who is the last person in the world who benefited this much by going over Hogan? Of course, it's Bill Goldberg, who won the WCW championship from Hulk Hogan in 1998. But think about this. Like, Bill Goldberg, you might not know this. He was a former NFL player, played for the Falcons, and the Falcons gave him a shot because he played locally at the University of Georgia, which is also the alma mater of Malcolm Mitchell. Like, what other parallel? Oh, you know what, Rachel? I'll go one step further. Guess which team?
I'm going to interrupt you. Who would find that fact besides you? Is there anyone in the world who would put those two together?
Probably not. But here's the amazing thing. And you think you're like, oh, that's pretty interesting. No, it gets worse. Guess who drafted Bill Goldberg in the 11th round of the 1990 NFL draft? And yes, the draft had 11 rounds back in 1990. Spoiler alert, I'll give it to you. It was the Los Angeles Rams, the Patriots' opponent this week. Check and mate.
If you're not convinced, we're all just playing checkers.
If you're not convinced to start Malcolm Mitchell now, there's nothing I can do to help you.
I'm sold. I don't know about anyone else, but I am sold. Along the lines of Malcolm Mitchell, some newcomers who are really coming into their own in the final weeks. One of the guys is Taylor Gabriel, Atlanta Falcons wide receiver. Since Week 8, this is a guy who's been putting up consistent points in his last 4 games. He has 4 touchdowns, including 2 touchdowns in Week 12. The Falcons play the Chiefs this week. Is he the real deal as we head into the fantasy playoffs?
He's certainly the number 2 receiver to Julio Jones. A lot of people anticipated Mohamed Sanu being the guy who stepped up, and a long time ago I thought it might have been Justin Hardy, but no, it's been Taylor Gabriel. He really thrives out of the slot. Patrick Peterson was locked up on Julio Jones, was able to shut him down, which allowed him to run free. I don't know that Marcus Peters or anybody in Kansas City is going to be able to shut down Julio Jones completely. And so far this season, every time that Julio Jones has one of those dud performances, he returns the following week and has over 100 receiving yards. So I expect this to be a bigger Julio Jones game. I think we'll see more involvement from Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman. So Taylor Gabriel, there'll be some matchups for him down the stretch. I'm not necessarily sure this is going to be one of them.
Speaking of dud performances, we really can't afford any duds at this point. For most of us, we need the points. So as far as guys who are consistent starters for us, are there any matchups this week that are causing you concern and have you second-guessing whether you want to start a guy we would usually start?
Yeah, I think this starting Thursday night with Des Bryant going up against Xavier Rhodes, like it really isn't an appetizing situation. You really have to think about it. But, of course, I don't think a lot of people have the depth to really be able to afford to not start Des Bryant, at least not in a flex spot. So it's tough. Marvin Jones did get a little bit of separation from him on Thanksgiving, so I'm a little bit hopeful. I really think the Cowboys are going to step up. I know everybody's just anticipating a bad game from Dak Prescott, but that's dangerous. And so even though the numbers show, I mean, the Vikings have been very good against quarterbacks this season, I'm still confident enough to leave him in my lineup, but it does give you pause. And if you're playing daily fantasy, Des Bryant should obviously probably not be in your lineup unless you're playing Thursday only. But even then, everybody would be on him. It would cost too much. So anyways, some other one like Brandon Cooks, I think we could pretty much move on from. I think he's name value right now, but it really hasn't been delivering over the last couple of years. Todd Gurley, I mentioned before, going up against the Patriots. They do a really good job of stopping the run, so I would be a little bit apprehensive there. Jay Ajayi is going to be a tough one to start against the Ravens. Not only is his offensive line battled some injuries, but the Ravens have just been great stopping the run. So I would really be concerned with that one. I would consider it if his three linemen come back. I would consider it because again, without knowing everybody's options or what your specific situation is, I would try to avoid Jay Ajayi if possible. And the same thing goes for Rob Kelly, somebody who's played really well a couple of weeks ago, had kind of a mediocre performance against the Cowboys. Now he's got another tough game going up against the Cardinals, who are number 2 in rush defense. So that's going to be a tough one. So those are some of the people right now that I'm avoiding, like that just stand out to me.
This is all good stuff.
Oh, by the way, Allen Robinson, too, going up against the Broncos.
Okay, good names to know. Final words of wisdom as you send us into Week 13. Is there anything else that we didn't ask you that you wanted to get off your chest here? Or do you feel confident that we have all the tools and tips and tricks to get us through this week with a win?
I feel we're in a good spot. I don't think that there's any glaring things. I'm looking over the schedule. I know again, talking about the quarterback, it's just I really am kicking myself. I mean, it's one thing to be sitting here being bummed about playing Dak Prescott as your backup quarterback when it's been doing so well so far. But man, I really wish I would have. Oh, why didn't I hold on to Colin Kaepernick? But you know who was another fine quarterback option? Matt Barkley played really well last week, and I think he was victimized by a lot of his receivers dropping the ball, including the potential winner in the closing moments of regulation. That was pretty tough. But you know what? He was out there throwing the ball pretty well. So I think that's good. I think the Raiders are looking pretty good. Derek Carr, all those guys. I can't wait for the Giants-Steelers game. It looks like a pretty fun matchup. You got Odell against Antonio Brown and the two of the quarterbacks from 2004 who've played so well. By the way, neither one of them as good as Phillip Rivers, but whatever. That's for another discussion at another day. But I think everybody's doing well. I know a lot of people were probably stung by Russell Wilson last week against Seattle, or against Tampa Bay.
Terrible.
But it was bad. But Tampa Bay put together two great back-to-back games against potential Super Bowl teams in Kansas City and Seattle. So I don't think that. I think it's more that the Buccaneers are pretty good, but now they're going to be on the road, going to San Diego, a team that's got a great offense. They're going to be tested, especially just making that cross country trip and all that stuff. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. So a lot of good stuff going on. But if you had Russell Wilson last week and are worried about the Panthers, don't. I think Pete Carroll is pretty unbeatable in primetime games in Seattle. And coming off a loss, Seattle always seems to rise to the occasion. So I expect a huge bounce-back game for Russell Wilson.
Well, Adam, I'm just hung up on the fact that you keep on trying to make us feel bad for you that you have to start Dak Prescott this week.
It is bad, yeah.
It's the worst fantasy problem to have. A lot of us are doing a lot worse than you are.
I have teams that are in pretty horrible shape where you're like, ugh, but thankfully I do have that one team to hold my hat. Actually, I got a couple. Listen, I've done okay. Like, this has been a strange year, and I've kind of pinpointed it. And I think perhaps when we get past Week 16, we could talk about next year and everything like that. But I've looked at it as somebody who is not like a serious or was leaning towards zero RB. I'm not a full-fledged member, but I lean that way. Every team where I drafted a running back in the first 2 rounds, they're out of the playoffs.
Right.
I'm just saying. I don't know if that's the way that goes.
Ezekiel Elliott or Le'Veon Bell, but I'm with you. Very inconsistent out there. Spencer Ware was your guy that was holding down the fort for me all year long, and I had to pick him up off the waiver wire. So there you go.
Oh my God! I drafted him in the. See, I love that. So I'm glad that worked out. See, there's some good stuff that's happened.
There is. This podcast has had a lot of ups and downs for us, but Spencer Ware was a bright spot in it. Adam, my last question for you is, where can we find you on Fantasy and Friends?
Oh, my gosh. Thank you so much for asking. Yes, Fantasy and Friends will be back Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Again, all I ask is that you DVR it. I mean, we would enjoy you guys watching it live. You can call in and things of that nature, but it's cool. Just DVR it. Check it out. There's a lot of hilarity. It's cheerleader week. We have the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders on Wednesday. And
people are going to hate that.
They're going to hate that, but it was actually, I know the qualifier, when you say actually, is always kind of a subtle put down, like actually, because whenever somebody's like, hey, actually, that's a good idea, what they're telling you is like, I didn't believe you could have a good idea. That was actually pretty good. So I hesitate to use that, but the Cowboys cheerleaders on Wednesday, the Raiderettes and Ravens cheerleaders on Tuesday, exceptional. I thought it's been going pretty well. So it's fun. We'll have the Rams cheerleaders on Friday. So it'll be a good time. I encourage everybody to check it out.
I'm sure your wife has just loved having you go to work this week.
Huge fan. She's loved every moment of it.
All right, Adam, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
The pleasure was all on this side of the phone, and I'm already looking forward to next week.